A relationship with the right referral partner could be a game changer for any B2B company. So what if you could reverse engineer these relationships at a moment's notice? Start a podcast, invite potential referral partners to be guests on your show, and grow your referral network faster than ever. Learn more at sweetfishmedia.com.
You're listening to B2B Growth, a daily podcast for B2B leaders. We've interviewed names you've probably heard before, like Gary Vaynerchuk and Simon Sinek, but you've probably never heard from the majority of our guests. That's because the bulk of our interviews aren't with professional speakers and authors. Most of our guests are in the trenches leading sales and marketing teams. They're implementing strategy. They're experimenting with tactics. They're building the fastest growing B2B companies in the world. My name is James Carberry. I'm the founder of Sweetfish Media, a podcast agency for B2B brands, and I'm also one of the co-hosts of this show. When we're not interviewing sales and marketing leaders, you'll hear stories from behind the scenes of our own business. We'll share the ups and downs of our journey as we attempt to take over the world. Just kidding. Well, maybe. Let's get into the show.
Welcome back to B2B Growth. I am your host for today's episode, Nikki Ivy with Sweetfish Media. I've got with me today Benoit Grouchko, who is CEO and founder of Teemo. Benoit, how are you doing today?
I'm good. Thank you, Nikki. How are you?
I'm well. I'm super excited to dig into this conversation. So guys, we're going to be talking about a couple of things, right? But what happens when an organization reaches a point where they need to reinvent themselves, sort of what types of things might cause that, and how to get through it. And then we're going to talk about a little bit when you just have to invent yourself altogether, what it takes to set yourself apart in a crowded space with big players. But before we get into all that, Benoit, I would love for you to just give us a little bit of background on yourself and what you and the folks at Teemo have been up to these days.
Sure. So first, thank you very much, Nikki, for inviting me to this podcast. And just in a few words, so I'm the CEO and co-founder of Teemo. And Teemo is a location platform, marketing platform for retail, grocery stores, and restaurants. And we basically help them drive more store traffic and sales thanks to personalized, targeted advertising. And so in our business, it's all about driving better performance to better achieve our customers' goals. And we do that thanks to data and technology.
Yeah, no, it's really cool stuff that you're doing. But what happens, and part of the reason why we're discussing this today is, sometimes when you're blazing a trail, you get your wrist slapped, or you do things that haven't been done before, and maybe there isn't a blueprint for it. So you find yourself in a spot where you got to reinvent yourself. Give us a little bit of background on what happened with Teemo there and how you turned it around.
Yeah, so maybe just to give a little bit of context, Teemo was founded in France, in Europe, 4 years ago, and we expanded into the US a year and a half ago now. So, as you know, last year was the year of GDPR in Europe, and actually, in our business, it's all about getting high-value data to drive better performance for our customers. And in our case, one of the key data that we leverage is location data, because being able to leverage granular and accurate location data is a way for us to be much more accurate and efficient in the value that we deliver to our customers. So location data is amazing from a marketing standpoint. It's also very sensitive from a privacy standpoint, because It's about where people go in their real life, right? Mm-hmm. And so what happened last year is a couple of months after GDPR, the French Data Protection Authority, the CNIL, decided to put in place a new regulatory framework for location-based advertising. And to put this new framework in place, they actually pointed us publicly to put in place this new framework, basically because we're the leader in the space, so it was natural for them to turn towards us. Mm-hmm. And they wanted it to be public, so to draw as much attention as possible to make sure everyone would be aware and it would have as much impact as possible. So we worked with them hand in hand for around 2.5 months to, walk them precisely through how our technology works, how the ecosystem works. That was a way for them to refine what they were expecting, and then for us to provide them with basically a plan about how we wanted to adjust our business. And so that resulted in the beginning of October 2018 in them officially announcing us as being officially GDPR compliant. But definitely that implied some key changes to our value proposition.
I love this story because it's this example of how you start out and, you're just going where the ideas and the market and instincts naturally take you without sort of asking for permission because your intentions were pure, right? You mentioned it's sensitive stuff, but where you guys were going with it was a place to elevate the industry. And then it ends up going from being, like I said, this thing where, you're getting this warning to this now being the blueprint for how things need to go in order to be compliant moving forward. It's a great story.
Yeah, this is definitely something that we took very seriously before GDPR. We got audited by an external, company, law company that actually made an official statement about us being GDPR compliant 3 months before GDPR. But then, it's all about interpretation. And so we were clearly in that gray area where, everyone had its own interpretation of GDPR, which tried to, and we basically, we followed those guidelines from those law companies, etc. And then the DPA, the Data Protection Authority, decided to have a more specific interpretation. So yeah, it's basically trailblazing, right?
Yeah, it is. It's exciting stuff. And on this subject, though, we were talking offline about different catalysts for reinventing yourself, which is sort of what we just described in your story with the warning turning into being, creating the blueprint for folks moving forward. An entire industry is now reinventing itself in retail. And you were talking to me about the role that digital marketing plays in that reinvention. Dig into that for us.
Yeah, sure. So actually, it's interesting because the first thing I would say is when we talked about reinventing oneself, obviously, it's been a rough few months for us. But now that we've been through it, we're actually in a much more comfortable position because we know exactly what we've got to do. We've got the official stamp of approval. So it's a way for us to operate with much more confidence for us, for our partners, for our customers. And on top of that, and that reminds me of what it means to reinvent himself and what it leads to. For our US operations too, it also puts us in a very comfortable spot because a bunch of regulations are potentially going to come around, and strong from our experience in Europe, we know what we've got to do. So it provides us with a lot of thought leadership and expertise on the topic. And that's pretty much the same with retail right now, right? There's digital, they're being transformed by digital in general at all levels, from, e-commerce to the user experience in store, to the user journey, to buying, to shopping. So I think they're going through a very interesting phase. And in particular, I think they've been having a major challenge for the last few years, which is that, there's the physical world on one hand, and on the other hand, there's the digital world. And there's always been kind of a gap between those two worlds. It's been hard to match them. And what's amazing with smartphones is that because they're both digital devices and at the same time they're with us every day, all day long, it's actually an opportunity to build a bridge between those two worlds and actually provide retailers with, marketing solutions and solutions in general that can take full advantage of digital. So, this is one typical example where, on top of reinventing the user experience and having an omni-channel user journey, retailers can also reinvent their marketing strategy, taking full advantage of the digital potential.
For sure. And that's, more folks are catching on and taking advantage of it now. And GDPR plays a really big role in that, especially with the BOPIS stuff that people are doing. And my hope is that, not as many people have to go extinct as we might have thought if they jump on this very quickly, but it can be tough. It can be tough. Another thing that you and I talked about offline was, in addition to this idea of reinventing yourself, and you guys know a little bit about this because you're expanding into the U.S. where you're having to break new ground, right? Talk a little bit about what it's like to become a known entity in a crowded space. So not necessarily reinventing yourself, but just inventing yourself altogether for an organization, and some of the things folks can do to differentiate themselves.
Yeah, so it's definitely far from simple, for sure. And the reality is, you can be the leader somewhere, and then you enter into another market. No one knows you, so you're really starting from scratch. And so then it's like, all right, how do we break in, right? And I think in the end, it's all about the value that you deliver. So basically, if you have a very sharp angle, if you're very clear on the additional value, on the difference that you can provide to your customers, then it's all about going after them and obviously convincing the first ones. The first ones are the hardest because they're taking the risk. It's like you're a completely unknown entity. You have nothing to reassure them, but it's about finding someone who would be willing to take the risk, because you're solving a big problem for that person. Mm-hmm. So once you get that, then it's a flip, because then you have some elements of proof and reassurance, and then it's obviously hard work, but it's really about, if you drive more value, there's indicators, there are key performance indicators that customers look at, and if you outperform, then it becomes a no-brainer, right? It's like, all right, they're doing this better, so I'm just going to turn towards them. And then you start to have, there's a virtuous circle, I would say, where you become from, a completely unproven entity to someone who is actually known for providing superior value there. And then we're definitely not there yet, but, after some time, it becomes the opposite. It's like, the question is not like, I'm taking a risk by working with them, to, I'm going to have to justify why I'm not working with them. So we're not there yet, but, it becomes, that's the goal.
Yeah, that's got to be the goal no matter what, I think. I think the most successful people are the ones who are dreaming big, right? And who are thinking of things on that level versus just sort of settling for, some level of comfort. So this is great. I'm really, really excited about the things that you shared. It was great to get to pick your brain and see what I could get out of it. But now, Benoit, is the part of the show where I ask you about what you're putting in your brain. What types of educational resources are you engaging with, or you and your team, that have got you excited, that are or informing your approach? What are you reading or listening to these days?
Well, so there's a lot. I think the key there, before pointing towards specific materials, is a mindset. And it's the mindset of, putting oneself into question and always wanting to reinvent oneself, actually. So, trying to get better and better every time, and, never being satisfied. And so I think this attitude of, always wanting to learn more and achieve more, that's the ground. But then, in terms of some specific things that I got a lot of value from, I got very, very educated from. So I think one is mentoring. Having some mentors, people that I met over my career, and that have been providing me with invaluable advice. And I think I wouldn't be there without them. And they're helping me grow every day, for sure. So I think this is one one way to educate oneself that I would highly recommend. We don't always think about that. We're very busy. Everyone's got, loads of stuff to do and we're working hard. But actually turning towards those people who, you've got huge respect for, that can be tremendously helpful. So that's one thing. And then the other one is I actually read quite a lot from inspirational people. And I think you get a lot from that. So, learning from people are willing to share their experience and what they've been through and what they learned and what they succeeded at and what they failed at. And it's sometimes you're like, oh, I've been through this. Oh, I've seen that before. Mm-hmm. And that's really interesting to see those kind of, point of views. Like, for instance, one book that I've read and that has definitely inspired me a lot and taught me a lot is it's a pretty famous book about startup life, which is called The Hard Thing About Hard Things. So I don't know if you ever heard of this one, but it's basically a guide about all the tough things that they're not going to tell you mm-hmm. and that you're going to have to learn the hard way.
I love it. So you're the first person who's mentioned mentors when I asked that question. And it's really powerful. And in my own experience, my career, mentors have been such a huge learning resource for me. And so that really resonates with me. And I think you're absolutely right that it's a mindset thing first, right? You have to always want to or place a high value on failing and learning and picking yourself up and trying again. So all good stuff. And I know people are going to want to get to know you better and follow along with you, Benoit. How can folks connect with you?
So they can definitely shoot me an email. And so my email is Benoit, Benoit, at Teemo, Teemo.co. Or they can always connect to me on LinkedIn too. But like sending me an email straight away is probably the most straightforward way to connect with me. So if I can be of any help, or if anything, I'd be happy to. Feel free to reach out.
Well, thanks so much. Like I said, this has been great. So much valuable stuff. Best of luck inventing yourselves now that you've broken into to the U.S. I don't think it'll take too much time before we all know your name. Thanks again, Benoit, for coming on the show. Have a good one.
Thank you very much, Nikki. Have a good one too. Bye.
We totally get it. We publish a ton of content on this podcast, and it can be a lot to keep up with. That's why we've started the B2B Growth Big Three, a no-fluff email that boils down our 3 biggest takeaways from an entire week of episodes. Sign up today at sweetfishmedia.com/big3. That's sweetfishmedia.com/big3.